Hey, what's happening, Herpers? So I'm excited to be back with another patron-chosen video for you this week. For the month of February, my patrons had fantastic timing and voted for me to discuss what to do now that rattlesnake season, or really just snake season in general, is right around the corner. The rattlesnakes tend to be the snakes that people are most concerned about, but they are all starting to wake up. And wherever you live, it's inevitable that you are going to start seeing news stories warning you that snake season is beginning, snakes are coming out, and sometimes they will even try to make it sound extra scary by letting you know that bites are on the rise this season. So if you're somebody that wants to go out hiking, or you're getting ready to start doing the spring yard work and you're concerned about rattlesnake season, this video is hopefully going to put your fears to rest, because the big takeaway of this video should be that rattlesnake season is a myth and you're never safe outside. Wait, no. I mean, rattlesnake season is a myth, but you're plenty safe outside, just not from snakes during the winter. I'm going to explain this and it will start to sound less scary. But nonetheless, in today's video, I'm going to try to dispel the myth of snake season, or at least explain what it means for you and what actions you need to take to keep yourself safe during snake season. And while I discuss the facts versus fiction of rattlesnake season, I'm going to be putting in some footage of Spot, my Western Diamondback's most recent feeding, because let's face it, he's much better looking than me, and his feeding footage will make for a more entertaining video. But with that intro out of the way, thank you once more to the patrons that voted for this video topic. If you would like to join my patrons in voting for one video topic per month and getting your name in the end credits of my videos, there will be a link somewhere down in the description where you can sign up to become a patron if that is of interest to you. And now let's get Spot, my Western Diamondback rattlesnake fed and talk about when exactly rattlesnake season begins. So first things first, when do rattlesnakes come out of hibernation? And now there's already somebody in the comments. Reptiles don't hibernate, they brumate. Kinda? So here's the thing, brumation is a type of hibernation, but they aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, what most people think of as the difference between brumation and hibernation is that in brumation, like what people say reptiles do, on warmer days they'll come out, they'll wake up, they aren't completely asleep for the entire winter. And the reason this is kind of a silly distinction to make is that's how most animals hibernate. Most animals don't go to sleep for a solid 4 or 5 months. They will wake up when the weather permits and when the weather gives them a reason to do so, and snakes are no different. So the idea that you have to jump down somebody's throat if they say brumation instead of hibernation when discussing reptiles is really just kind of silly. And as herpetologists, I think we can all agree that we should be saving that aggressive energy for when somebody calls a turtle a tortoise. But in all seriousness, a good place to start with dispelling the myth of snake season is with understanding that snakes aren't going to sleep for the entire winter. They will find a den where they can keep themselves warm. Usually they can get deeper into the rocks on colder nights and keep a more consistent temperature, so they can kind of avoid the temperature swings of a warmer day and then a really cold night, or when frosts hit, they can get deeper into the rocks and deeper into the earth and kind of avoid some of those more extreme swings in temperature. But that being said, as the weather warms up, we've had a few days now where we've gotten close to 80 degrees. We might have even gotten into 80 degrees in Phoenix and Scottsdale. And because of that, snakes are starting to wake up and they're starting to get closer and closer to leaving their burrows. And if that sounds like rattlesnake season is starting, yeah, that is one way to kind of look at the start of rattlesnake season, when rattlesnakes start to leave their dens and start venturing further and further out. We're not quite there yet, but that point in the season would make sense to look at as kind of a start to rattlesnake season. But one of the reasons I don't like the idea of looking at just when does rattlesnake season start is it kind of assumes that people aren't coming into contact with these rattlesnake dens during the winter. If it's not rattlesnake season, how are you going to see a rattlesnake? But that is not the truth, because rattlesnakes can pick any nice, warm, secluded place to be their den, and I've seen on many occasions rattlesnakes choose to den in someone's garage over the winter. So come January, if you're moving things around in the garage, trying to make room to put the Christmas decorations away, it's really not uncommon for people to find rattlesnakes, and it's not because rattlesnake season is starting earlier or it's warmer than usual and the snakes are coming out. You just happen to find where that rattlesnake was wintering. Chances are they had been in there for months. Maybe when you went to get the Christmas decorations out of the garage, they had to kind of move and shuffle around a little bit and you didn't notice them. But chances are they've been spending most of the winter in that same spot. And just because it's not rattlesnake season yet, because we're not into March or we're not into the first 2 weeks of 80-degree weather, doesn't mean that you're safe from having to be on the lookout for rattlesnakes if you live somewhere where rattlesnakes live. So with understanding that even though it's not technically rattlesnake season, people can still easily come across rattlesnakes if they decide to den in their backyard or den inside of their garage. Other things like weather can also drive snakes out. There was one Christmas Eve where I I drove to someone's house to pull a baby rattlesnake out of their front yard. And it happened to be because it was raining and it was a very dry year and it was the first rain that we had had in months. So it didn't matter that it was Christmas Eve and that it was 45 degrees out. This baby rattlesnake came out and was hydrating, drinking right out of the crack between the cement in the garage. And it very well may have been denning somewhere inside of that garage, but because it had been a dry year and that rattlesnake really needed water, it decided to come out even on a freezing 45-degree wet day. So with those two examples of how people can commonly come into contact with snakes, even during times of year where it seems too cold or seems like snake season shouldn't have started yet, let's get back to what starts happening around Phoenix. And I'm using Phoenix as an example because that's where I live, so that's where I'm familiar with the weather patterns and the snake behavior the most. But as the weather starts warming up towards the end of February, beginning of March, what you can start to expect is rattlesnakes are going to start to stir inside of their burrows. They're becoming more active. They're noticing the weather is warming up. And on warm days, they might come out of their burrow a little bit, kind of stick their head out. This behavior kind of makes me think of my boa constrictor Cleo. She loves to keep her whole body tucked under her hide, and then she'll kind of just turtle her head out, let her head sit in the basking spot, but not bring her whole entire body out. And that is classic rattlesnakes waking up from brumation or hibernation mode. You can think of these warmer days as days that the rattlesnakes have to kind of just sit at the mouth of their den or their burrow, kind of hit snooze, wait for the weather to warm up a little bit more, but it's a chance for them to start slowly warming up their cold blood and getting ready for this year's season. During this time, unless you're maybe part of a volunteer trail crew and you're out lifting logs or doing trail maintenance, or maybe you are reorganizing your garage like in that earlier example, it's not super likely that you are going to come into contact with the rattlesnakes yet, but the prime of rattlesnake season is just around the corner. And what I mean by the prime of rattlesnake season is not so much a time of year, but a Venn diagram, and the prime of rattlesnake season is right in the two overlapping circles. In one circle, you have the temperature range that rattlesnakes start to become active. The males fully leave their burrows or their dens, and depending on the species, they will start traveling sometimes 3 to 4 miles a day in search of females. So when the weather starts warming up and starts meeting that criteria for male rattlesnakes to start becoming more active, start looking for mates, and both male and female rattlesnakes to become more active and start laying in wait for food because they are ambush predators, so they have to find good places to sit and wait to ambush and make sure that they have enough meals to go into the breeding season with enough energy to be productive. But this temperature range that rattlesnakes like to be active in after the weather has had a chance to warm up for a few weeks tends to be anywhere from about 78 to 90-ish, 92 degrees. Once you start getting into the 90s, it starts getting even too hot for the rattlesnakes. And that brings me to the other side of the Venn diagram. If we have the snake's preferred temperature and activity seasonal range over here, we've got the humans' preferred temperature range for seasonal activity over here. And unfortunately, humans also really like it when the weather's between about 78 and 90 degrees. It's a little hot for a lot of people's taste, but here in Arizona, that is some of the best weather of the entire year, because once you start getting into June, July, August, we've got 115, 120 degree days where it's too hot for the people or the rattlesnakes to be out and about. But through the months of kind of the end of February on up until mid-May, sometimes the end of May, there is a lot more time where those two Venn diagrams of when rattlesnakes are happy and like to be out and when people are happy and like to be out have more overlapping area, and that's what's responsible for what we call snake season. It's why we also in Arizona tend to have a second snake season come fall when the weather starts cooling down and people start being out, and our kind of preferred temperature range bubbles kind of overlap again and create that Venn diagram of snake season. But long story short, that's really all snake season tends to be. When the weather's nice and people want to be outside, and when snakes want to be starting to get their first few meals of the year and maybe starting to look for a mate. Those two things come together and culminate in what the news calls snake season, and bites on the rise every year because, unfortunately, more snakes and more humans being in the same place at the same time tends to result in more bites, but there are a few things that you can do to avoid a bite this snake season. Now, I'm not a snake expert, just a nerd with too many snakes who likes to go hiking, but there are a few things that you can do to drastically reduce the chances of being bitten by a rattlesnake this season. And the first one is be aware of your surroundings. It sounds silly, it's cliche, but rattlesnakes have a built-in alarm system to warn you if you are getting too close, to warn you that, hey, I'm here, I don't want to be stepped on. And the least we can do is keep one of our ears open to be available to hear that warning if we are getting close to a rattlesnake. So if you go hiking or running in the mornings, if you go hiking or running during the times of day where the temperature is really in that rattlesnake sweet spot from 78-ish, really 76 all the way on up to 90 degrees. It's a good idea to make sure you don't have both earbuds in. Leave at least one ear free to hear that rattle if you start getting close to something. And of course, just look where you're going. So that's rule number 1, keep your ears and eyes open. Rattlesnakes are hard to see, they're a lot easier to hear, but if you're looking for them and you have an ear open, you've got a better chance of seeing it before you step on it. Anyway, rule number 2 is for when you have actually seen the snake, you know where it is, and it's just keep your distance. Now, how much distance you need to keep from the snake is going to depend on how big the snake is. As a very general rule of thumb, rattlesnakes can strike about 1/3 to half of their body length. It depends on the size, it depends on if they are uphill on the slope of the mountain to you, they're going to get a little extra hang time, but about 1/3 of their body length is a good rule of thumb. And so based on the sizes of the absolute largest rattlesnakes out there, 3 to 4 feet of space is going to give you more than enough room to be safely out of their strike range. Now, if they start coming towards you, sometimes it's because they see your shadow and they live in a desert and they want to get in that shade. Don't worry, just take another step back and maintain that 3 to 4 feet of space between you and the snake. And if you do that, there's no possible way that they're going to be able to strike in the blink of an eye and strike you. They might get nervous and they might kind of strike the air towards you, but if you maintain that 3 to 4 feet of space away from any rattlesnake you encounter here in the wild in Arizona, I can promise you that you are going to be a safe distance and that rattlesnake isn't going to have a chance of striking you. And you might be thinking, all right, that trick works great if I'm out hiking on a trail, but what if it's in my backyard or my garage and I can't just leave a snake there? All right, fine, I'd like to say the snake was there first, but fine, I understand not wanting to have a snake in your garage. So if that happens and it's somewhere where you absolutely can't leave the snake alone, it has to be removed, I recommend that you call a licensed professional to remove the snake. Don't risk doing it yourself unless you've been properly trained. There are places you can go to get trained in how to relocate rattlesnakes. But if that's not your cup of tea, you can easily call your local fire department. Sometimes they will remove them, sometimes they will be able to refer you to someone locally who's your weird snake guy, and they will be able to come out and remove it for you. If you live in the Phoenix area, I really like the company Rattlesnake Solutions. You can give them a call, and they service a wide part of the valley here to relocate rattlesnakes safely and humanely in a way that I feel gives them the best chance of actually surviving the relocation. So there are options out there if you don't want to remove the rattlesnake yourself. But the most important takeaway for you to know if you are just trying to stay safe and you come across a rattlesnake while you're out hiking is give it 3 to 4 feet of space and you are going to be well outside of its strike range and don't need to worry. Unless you hear a second rattle behind you, then you got to kind of stop and be worried. That usually doesn't happen, don't worry. All right, and finally, rule number 3 for staying safe in the vicinity of rattlesnakes. This rule kind of doubles back into rule 1 a little bit and the be aware of your surroundings thing, and kind of gets into bonus rule number 4, which is don't drink and snake, but it's be mindful of where your hands are. Also be mindful of where your ankles are, but for some reasons we'll get into, the hands tend to be the bigger issue. For anybody that doesn't know what I'm referring to, it's the fact that most rattlesnake bites happen on the hands, and those hands tend to belong to men between about 18 and 25, and usually there was alcohol in their system. So rule number 3 is don't stick your hands anywhere you can't see. If you're rock climbing or bouldering, don't stick your hands where you can't see up onto ledges that you haven't been able to visually make sure there's not a rattlesnake perched on. If you're out golfing and you're retrieving your ball, don't just blindly stick your hand down into a bush to get it. Easter's right around the corner, so you want to make sure that kids aren't just blindly sticking their hands under bushes looking for Easter eggs, places where there might be a rattlesnake just waiting for a meal. Because situations like that, where a rattlesnake's just sitting, maybe they've been sitting for days waiting for something warm to go by, they're a pit viper, they sense the warmth of a hand going for a golf ball or an Easter egg or a nice ledge to grab onto while you're rock climbing, and they don't always take the time to piece together, oh, that's not food. All they know is they've been waiting for days, they finally see something warm, they strike first, ask questions later, and it's not an intentional bite. They're probably bummed that they don't have that venom to use anymore when they do get an actual meal that happens in front of them. But long story short, don't stick your hands anywhere where you can't see. Most hiking shoes, whether you use trail runners or actual hiking boots, aren't going to provide all that much protection against a rattlesnake bite. If it's a smaller snake, if it's a baby, and they've got smaller fangs, you might get lucky with your boot stopping a bite. But larger snakes are going to have a pretty decent chance at getting through your boot, so don't just hike blindly through tall grass or take big steps over logs you can't see the other side of. Just because you have hiking boots on, that's not necessarily going to protect you. But getting bitten by a rattlesnake just because you walked by it is not nearly as common as some guy saying, here, hold my beer, and going to touch it and then getting bit on the hands. And that's why most bites tend to happen on the hands when people get bit. It's because they were messing with them either to relocate the snake or to show off for somebody. Whatever the circumstance is, alcohol is very commonly involved. And I like to talk about this because it just goes to show rattlesnakes don't go out of their way to bite people. Usually they have to be kind of harassed into it, or they just got stepped on, caught off guard in some other way, and they bit before they thought. But it's never their first choice, and rattlesnakes really aren't the vicious animals people make them out to be. So the 3 most important rules to avoid a rattlesnake bite this season are: 1, be aware of your surroundings; 2, if you do see a rattlesnake, give it at least 3 to 4 feet of space, maintain that distance, and you will be safely outside of their strike range; and 3, don't stick your hands or your feet where you can't see, whether that's tall grass, bushes, anywhere where you're sticking a limb of your body outside of the space where you have total vision to ensure there isn't a rattlesnake just waiting to bite a prey item that happens by. Make sure that you don't stick your hands or feet anywhere where you can't see. And then I'm going to go ahead and include along with that rule 3.5 that ties into why so many rattlesnake bites happen on the fingers, and that is don't drink and snake. Drinking never leads to better judgment calls, so whatever you do, don't handle venomous snakes under the influence. If you're out camping and you have had a few and you see a rattlesnake, for the love of God, don't go try to interact with it in any way. The maintain 3 to 4 feet of space needs to be doubled if you are under the influence of anything. Keep that 6 to 8 feet away from rattlesnakes if you have been drinking. And please just don't interact with them, because it gives a bad name to rattlesnakes. When people hear someone got bit, they don't think, oh, it was a guy picking it up, playing with it after he's had a few beers. They think, yep, that's what rattlesnakes do. And it reinforces the beliefs and attitudes that lead to people just killing rattlesnakes on sight. And that sucks. And I think that is the conclusion to today's video. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Thank you so much to everybody who watched this video all the way to the end. And thank you to the patron who voted for this video topic to be the patron chosen video for February. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it was what you were expecting and you got some information out of it. If not, please let me know down in the comments what you wish I would have covered in this video, or if there's anything I forgot to cover, let me know, and maybe that will be the topic of my next video. But if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button so I know to make more videos like this in the future. And with that out of the way, I would like to thank all of the patrons that voted for this video topic and make it possible for me to make videos for this channel as often as I do. I've been real good about posting at least 1 full video every week so far in 2024, and I've still got the daily shorts coming, so if you aren't subscribed, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of that. And with that, thank you to all of my head herpers first. Thank you, Allie Ward, Amanda Lynn, Deborah Torgerson, Jane Cabin Girl, JCH, Lindsay Justice, Loki and Thor, Sierra Sicard, Tiffany H, and Wyatt Gilbert. Thank you again to all my head herpers. Your support at the highest tier level every month means the world to me. And thank you so much to all the other patrons that support me at the other tier levels. Your support really helps these videos come out as often as they do. So thank you from me, and thank you from everybody else who enjoys these videos, because your support really helps me keep this show going. Anyway, that does it for this week's rattlesnake season video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. I hope all of your critters are coming out of brumation or hibernation, whatever you want to call it, easily enough, but most of all, I hope that you just keep herping.